product of the Boston Public Schools, going to Russell Elementary, Grover Cleveland Middle School, and then Charlestown High. And I found myself going to Maine for school at Colby College in Waterville, Maine, and returned back for a career in public service. So I've worked at all different levels of public service. So I've worked with the city for over 8 years at the Boston Parks and Recreation Department, and I focused on external affairs while there, essentially programming all corners of the city of Boston, doing events outdoors and indoors as well too. Currently in my role, I work as Director of External Affairs at the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. So as Director of External Affairs, I'm focused on, or I've taken a leave of absence, but I was focused on engaging stakeholders across the Commonwealth about our 5-year housing plan and the Affordable Homes Act, a bill that put forward $5.2 billion for affordable housing across the Commonwealth. So done a lot of work in the community in Roxbury specifically, organizing on different campaigns such as Elizabeth Warren's campaign and Ed Markey's campaign. I worked for the Democratic Party for some time, organizing across the Commonwealth, and been very involved in my community throughout time.
So with regard to housing, you talk about housing. We know that's a big, probably the number one issue, even as Massachusetts is becoming very difficult for people to afford, even quite candidly in contrast to places across the country, right? So, and my father would often say, if you get a chance to put your hands on some land, that's the one thing that they don't reproduce, right? There's only so much land, right? Like, so, there's like the seaport in those areas that they built like kind of on bodies of water. But I'm curious, how would you, so District 7 City Councilor, that's a rarely contested seat right now.
One could say that, yeah.
One could say that, right? A lot. I don't know. I think 22 people or something like that running for that one seat.
11 candidates currently there.
Oh, it's 11.
Yeah.
Okay. So, how would you how would you address that? I mean, people really feel that with a lot of the properties there, we know they did that whole report that was, I think, $8 an hour for the median income for people of color, in contrast to like $247,000.
Yes, sir.
That had everything to do with home ownership or land. Yeah. So how do we reconcile that? How do we do that when there's only so much land?
Absolutely. And, there's been some time since that report, but that dynamic still persists within our community. In the Black community in this district, home ownership rates are under 20%. That's the lowest across the Commonwealth. The average home ownership across the Commonwealth is about 35%. So we see that dynamic here in Boston because it's a renter-heavy city. Mm-hmm. That's one dynamic at play. But also, there's been a lot of injustice over time that have led to this situation. This community is socially engineered. When we think about redlining, and this is not unique to only the city of Boston, but there was a divestment of resources within this community that led to this situation. People were sold homes and they were underwater immediately, having interest rates that are in the double digits. So you couldn't keep up with the payments. And this was supposed to be their dream achieved, attaining their American dream, being able to buy a home. We've so long have held that very, very sacred. But folks were essentially underwater, lost their homes, turned into renters, and at the same time, divestment in that community in terms of like local resources and municipal resources and services. So essentially almost ghettoizing the community. Mm-hmm. And that dynamic is what we see today. And now, we see that there is gentrification within the community. It's ripe for development at this point, and a lot of investors want to come into the community. What I'm focused on is this idea that there's a lot of restorative justice that needs to happen, mm-hmm. And we need to be able to provide these are people that have helped build up the community, the opportunity to own their community. Mm-hmm. And we do have parcels of land within the district and throughout the city of Boston that can be developed to create home ownership opportunities. And I think we need to put a priority on home ownership mm-hmm. in this moment and creating affordable homes. Down the street on Talbot Ave, you have a development that has studio apartments to 3 bedrooms ranging from 180,000 to 350,000 roughly. And these are homeowner or condos, right? So these are opportunities for people to purchase them. I think that's the way that you create stability in a community over time. If people have more ownership in their community, and that's where they start to invest more in the community. But we do need to also create housing for people that don't want to be homeowners.
Mm-hmm.
But currently, I feel we've focused on subsidized housing in the form of extremely low income or low income housing, which I'm supportive of.
Mm-hmm.
But we also need to create housing for people that are in the workforce,
Mm-hmm.
that are in the middle class,
Mm-hmm.
because they can't qualify for low income housing
Mm-hmm.
and they can't afford market rate. So we need to think about housing and creating housing for everybody ultimately in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we've had some plans that are in motion, but I think we need to do more.
With that said, I appreciate your experience across the Commonwealth, though the position that you're running for is a district city councilor with that experience of doing stuff across the Commonwealth. I'm curious, with Massachusetts being having these higher institutions of higher learning, right? Which being the educational mecca really of the world. People come all over the world to come to New England and Massachusetts. With that said, we know that they're not. They have that pilot or payment in lieu of taxes. So institutions that are taking up a lot of real estate, land, right? And, benefiting from people who are coming here from all across the country. Many of them have endowments that are obscene, and really, with that said, not really I don't feel being held accountable to do their fair share in giving back to the communities that they're benefiting off of, particularly with underperforming public school systems, that people can't even go to some of these same institutions, and then gentrification happening. So, would that be something that you would challenge, and what would you do to be able to hold more accountable these institutions?
Absolutely.
To really be able to address some of the educational, vocational, and even housing?
Yep. No, absolutely. And I'm very much in support of it. And there are some great movements that are happening right now to put forward like the pilot bill that's going through. So payment in lieu of taxes. I think it's very important that these institutions, if they're and a lot of them are in the position to be able to pay it forward just as much as anybody else. If people's taxes are increasing and at a rate that's unstable for a lot of folks, our institutions that are benefiting off these communities should be able to pay it forward as well too. I think it's only right. And in a lot of situations, it's just asking them to do what they've promised that they would do, in some situations. So, I'm fully supportive of it, and I would love to work with these institutions to ensure that they're supporting our communities, our schools, and nonprofit organizations.
With that said, what is your position with regard to school committee? There was a referendum, non-binding, that was actually overwhelmingly seems supported, that people supported a fully elected school committee. We're the only we're the only county in the Commonwealth that doesn't have a fully elected school committee. Yeah. What would be your position with regard?
Yeah, my position is always give people the ability to elect their leaders. Right, so you put that vote and that option in people's hands. So I stand with the voters of our communities. I believe they can make the decisions that are best for themselves. They've done it with every other elected official that's come across. So what makes the school committee any different in this moment?
Okay, thank you. In that same vein, making sure that everybody has an opportunity to be able to participate.
Yes,
we do a lot of focus on those who are incarcerated, healing our land, right? Because this is a voting bloc, quite candidly, that's disenfranchised de facto and actually, in fact, because in the state of Massachusetts, the right was stripped from them if you're presently serving a felony conviction in 2000. Up until that point, that was their right. And it was quite candidly taken from them during a Republican administration because people were utilizing it to humanize themselves and having programs at MCI Norfolk that were rehabilitative, and people thought that was too much power. Union correctional officers, quite candidly, for people who are incarcerated. I was just sharing with the former guest that the 13th Amendment states that slavery was abolished with the exception of those who've been convicted of a crime. So for all intents and purposes, anyone incarcerated is relegated to the status of a slave, which is why you can treat them inhumanely and have them working for pennies a day.
In the district, there's a disproportionate number of my neighbors, my colleagues, my friends, and people in the community that are formerly incarcerated. We shouldn't take that right away from them. I believe they should be able to participate in our political system just as much as anybody else. And to the points that you made very eloquently, I agree and I support.
So you support felony reenfranchisement?
Yes.
And with that said, so the people who already have the right, here in the state of Massachusetts, there's no infrastructure to exercise it. People don't know they have the right, correctional officers and those who are incarcerated. And we're working in the Suffolk County with Sheriff Tompkins at the Nashua County and the Suffolk County House of Correction. Those are two institutions, and quite candidly, the only institution out in the 14 counties that we've been doing this for almost 3 decades, going behind the wall, bringing candidates, and we extend the invitation to all the candidates to come with us to go unit to unit and engage our returning citizens who are waiting pre-trial, those who are serving misdemeanors who can vote.
Yes.
So that's something that you would come in. We want to actually build infrastructure to really exercise, because we're doing it kind of piecemeal. But just as you and I have plenty of options to participate, we almost have to opt out, right? Because whether you're signing up to get your an ID, right? You have to you have to say no,
Absolutely.
right? Or if you're getting food stamps, so many different ways that you have to be able to register. You have options to vote. Where people are incarcerated, don't know they have it, and if they do have it, the registration forms, the absentee ballot forms are not there for them to be able to actually exercise the right that they already have. So we're looking to make it institutionalized and be able to make it in the Suffolk County that we can replicate it across the Commonwealth while we simultaneously are working to restore the rights for people who it's been taken from.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're doing on that. And what I'm going to say supports. I come from this perspective that we need to get our community more civically engaged. And that includes our incarcerated brothers and sisters as well, too. I think they deserve the opportunity to voice their opinion about the government and the resources that they wish to see within their community. And they still have rights.
Absolutely.
So we should uphold those rights for them as well, too. I don't think we should just strip them because they've made a mistake in their lives.
Absolutely.
And we need to be able to get them on the pathway of recidivism, and being productive members of our society is a big part of that. So we need to make sure that we're not turning our back on them and that we want them to be involved in this process with us as well, too.
In that same vein, so people coming from incarceration back into society, again, housing, number one thing, right?
Absolutely.
Employment, another big thing. Services, right? Mental health, all kinds of services that can help them to actually be able to recover from a lot of the trauma that they've experienced before being incarcerated, never mind subsequent being institutionalized, right? So re-entry is a big thing, and we're working with the Mayor's Office of Returning Citizens, and fortunately, they actually have a budget. They did have a budget. We've had a couple iterations, and the budget has grown. With that said, the challenge becomes you need more resources, and you need people who are directly impacted to be able to staff the Office of Returning Citizens. The model in DC is that it was run by a returning citizen. So you have cultural competency, you have an anointing, you have a empathy, you have a passion for this particular population. And unfortunately, the model here in Boston has never had a returned citizen who has been the executive director. They have one returned citizen who's an employee there. And so we're challenging every elected official, being the mayor candidates as well as the city councilors, to change that. I mean, our desire would be to actually see it fully staffed with returning citizens, but minimally the executive director should be a returned citizen. Is that something that you would support?
Yeah, I'd love to support that. I think we need to set the model for people, right? And we need to demonstrate that there are people that can reform their lives, and this is not the defining factor in their lives, right? You can come out and do something in your life that's impactful, and this is not the end of the line for you. So I fully support that.
Excellent. And so coming back into society, one of the things that we're hopeful to do, and I've challenged this with the Office of Returning Citizens, I think many of our models of funding are competitive as opposed to collaborative. And they foster, fighting over crumbs as opposed to incentivizing coalitions that each person has a role that they play, but in incentivizing people who come together as organizations, plural, as opposed to we're gonna give everybody a crumb and make them fight over each other. And so, so I really would like for them to be able to change even how they offer those grants, that they incentivize coalition and collaboration as opposed to competition.
Absolutely. And if you want to, and I think that speaks to a lot of issues we see within our community, this hyper competitiveness, and we feel that resources are limited. In order for us to really change the dynamics like within our community to ensure that we all can thrive in this moment, you need to make it a more collaborative approach. And we need to be thinking outside of the box and more creatively in how we distribute resources to folks like within our community, and even bringing in partners from nonprofit, for-profit entities that could be supportive in these moments as well too. And so I do have this perspective that we should be more collaborative as opposed to being pit against each other. I don't think that's fruitful for the community. It's doing many an injustice.
I mean, here in Massachusetts, again, we have enough resources, right? From, like I said, the educational institutions, right? We've got,
You got to be creative in how
we've got to be creative in how we use them. And so I would love to see intergeneration. One of the things we also are seeing is fragmentation, even as it relates to age, right? Like right now, the mayor is 40 years young, the youngest mayor in the history of the city of Boston. Beautiful, wonderful thing. Much of her administration is also 40 and under, right? Which is, young, and it's this generation, but sometimes it can be really toxic because people who are making really good money, who have education, but not maybe a whole lot of life experience, right, with this kind of power, and so there are lots of challenges with a young administration that's not really maybe learning from the wisdom of some elders, right? And so where it should be intergenerational, right?
Absolutely.
Where there's not old folks who are put out the pasture and, the young folks are the only ones who got, information and or vice versa, right? But intergenerational kinds of initiatives that can be sustained because we're coming up with innovation collaboratively.
When I was an organizer, something that I learned and understood was you take who you can get, right? As an organizer, ultimately. And, some of my greatest volunteers were people that, were a lot older and had a lot of wisdom to share as well, too. You build an organization, a healthy organization is a very diverse organization, not just ethnically, but racially as well, too. I mean, from an age perspective as well. And our backgrounds, our outlook. You need this for a healthy and vibrant organization. And when you're talking about a city, even more so, and why it's important. You need these different perspectives for the same reasons why we want to diversify our boardrooms in the Fortune 500 companies. You got to have different perspectives that's going to speak to all sorts of constituencies or end users or customers. So in this moment, in this city, obviously, there's a large share of our constituents that are elderly. We need people that be able to speak to them. And same as, for you, like your previous point about having the head of the
Office of Returning Citizens.
It should be somebody that was formerly incarcerated because they could speak to that population.
Absolutely.
So I think it's important that we take that in consideration when we're ever thinking about serving a certain population, we got to have diversity of thoughts and opinions, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure everybody feels included in this process, because that's how we're going to have a more fruitful result at the end of the day, and we're going to have better like perspectives to kind of operate off of.
You talked about restorative justice, right? Restorative justice practices, I think are things that need to be embedded within everything. It's for us to be most efficient and impactful with the resources. If we do it from a lens of restorative justice, right, acknowledging the disparate systems that have been set up, right, to be able to reconcile them, we have to acknowledge, how it was disproportionately set up in the first place.
Yes, sir.
Right. So with that said, there's lots of conversations about reparations. There's lots of conversations about restorative justice, reentry. And so I would love to be able to see, again, innovation and proposals for coalitions that are, as you said, cross-cultural, maybe the faith community, institutions of higher learning, youth, Comet Green, right? All these different things to be able to come up with how do we be most efficient with the land. And for restorative justice, I'd love to be able to train returned citizens in the building boom, right? For all the things, HVAC, and I mean, we're building, right?
We have a skill gap and shortage of workers in trades. So this is a way that we can reintroduce them into these trades, and they could make a really good living for themselves and be able to take care of themselves and their family and return back and be productive members of our society.
Yes. But to do that, we've got to be really intentional in being able to empower this workforce. So can you imagine training them, right? And also housing them, right? And then being able to build like a 5-star, say, hotel or an economic engine. Right, you talk about restorative justice, you get to build, if you feel like you've taken from community, maybe selling drugs or doing whatever, you have an opportunity to be able to give back and building an institution, a mechanism, a piece of real estate that you feel some ownership around. And that being a place that could be an economic engine to maintain itself as funding streams constantly change. But the hospitality industry is one that, we don't have enough hotels to be able to, for conferences and conventions and graduations and all the things. We don't have enough, but if it could be built by a workforce development of returned citizens that then is housing them, and now you have a movement that's helping people to be able to have these individual plans for them, right, to become homeowners, right, to become entrepreneurs, addressing their mental health. And all they have to do is, once they are stable and thriving, is give back to the movement, like the interest off of an endowment at a Harvard University.
And for me, growing up in Dorchester as a kid, I grew up in a rough neighborhood, right? And a lot of the examples that we had ahead of us, we didn't have the best examples about who we could be and what we can reach out for. We didn't have many doctors to look up to. We didn't have many lawyers to look up to. And I think our kids, our people, or the formerly incarcerated folks need examples of people that have traveled down their path, and now you've made a better life for yourself. I've known people that have turned around their lives and got into the trades, and it transformed like their perspective on how they look at things. Right now, they're very focused on their family. They're very focused on their job. They're very focused on being good at their craft. And so it gives them like a different perspective, outlook on life. And I think this is important. And we need to do that before they're incarcerated, of course, as well, too.
That's right.
But we don't give up on them when they are.
That's right.
So I think it's important that I love what you're talking about, and I'm a big proponent and supporter of it. And I think there's some programs already that are doing that with building pathways. So I think we need to just be able to try to build those partnerships further and ensure that more people understand that these resources are out there as well too, and continue to form those partnerships and finding different and creative ways where we can build the workforce of the future with our folks that are formerly incarcerated as well.
Thank you. We actually have a caller. Caller, you are live on the air. Go right ahead.
Peace. This is Jamal Crawford. How are you doing?
Hey, Jamal, how you doing today? I feel like I am.
All right, very well. So I really, when we're talking about, kind of bridging I don't know, differences of communities or this or that. Here's one of the struggles I've always found in Boston. So everybody is feeling like Black Lives Matter and all of this type of thing now, right? And people are feeling really confident in many areas in this. But it came off of the off of the back of the revolutionary movements that incorporated Black Power and all this. And Black Power, political, economic, local, and all this, for us, by us, do for self, and all this type of thing. Now, to me, at least, my opinion, in Boston, we've come into the age-old conflict between the grassroots and the bourgeoisie, if you will. So how do we bridge that gap between the regular community folk and a lot of the what I call the nonprofit industrial complex that is taking over? And how are we able to really bridge that gap? I guess I'll leave it there.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, and I'd like to share that the current counselor Tanya Anderson, she's put forward and created the District 7 Advisory Council, and I think that was a wonderful moment for our community, because what it did, it took folks who were like subject matter experts from the community that pulled them into this process to help decide and create policy for the community. And I'd like to build on that and continue to ensure that more people from our community are involved in the process of creating policy and helping to steer the next city councilor, and ensuring that they're creating the right programs and initiatives for their community. And the way I think what's very important to me is the voice of everybody, right? Not just one subset of people. Everybody should have an opportunity to have a say. And so the vision that I have is to have quarterly town hall meetings where we bring the community together and we have a vote. Everybody comes together, we have different proposals put forth, and people vote on the proposals that they support. And we can hear testimony from everybody. And I think for the people that feel voiceless in this moment, for the people that don't feel like they're heard or don't feel like they have agency, you're the ones that I'm speaking to. I want you to feel like you can change your government because you can. I want you to feel like you can change your community because you can. And I want to work with you to ensure that we can do that. So it's about figuring out ways in which... So it's the untraditional voices that I want to have like the mic this time around, to be able to speak up and to be able to transform their community. And so everybody needs to understand how they could do that, and that's what I'm here to try to do.
So let me just give this, and then I'm gonna jump off. But what I'm talking about when I say the bourgeoisie, because clearly, District 7 is this is not where the bourgeoisie lies. Although there are some here. But what I'm talking about is the difference in between segments of Black Boston that seem to be more satisfied with events and galas and black tie affairs and pictures and, this type of thing, as opposed to some of the, what you were just talking about and what I call, policies, plans, and proposals to actually affect something. Because...
I disagree with you. And what I'm trying to describe here in this moment is it could be very simple or it could be very well in depth. It could be as simple as, if you don't like your sidewalks on your street, we can canvass your street, we can take pictures, and we could send it through 311. And me as your city councilor and my colleagues will work to fulfill that and make sure that we're improving that infrastructure. I'm helping people to understand that you can have an impact on local government and politics in ways that are very simple. So it could be very granular. It could be your block. It could be your community. How do you have the ability to voice your opinion in this moment that can help change something in your community? I think it's very important that we get people to move the needle in small and large ways. So it's about building an infrastructure where everybody can participate and everybody can make some positive changes within their community. But I think it's important that we try to get as many of our colleagues, neighbors, friends, family, loved ones involved in this process. And that means the people that feel like they don't have a voice in this moment.
All right, absolutely. Yo, God bless both of y'all. Have a great day. I'm going to keep listening and do your thug thizzle.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Brother Jamal.
Peace.
Peace.
I'd like to share a story.
Yeah.
So, I was out gathering signatures, and I came across these two elderly women that were sitting on a bench, and I was talking to them about my candidacy and sharing some of the ideas that I had. And both of them seemed very impressed, and one of them even said, "I'm going to support you. I'm going to give you my vote." A third woman came, she had her walker, and she, sat down on the bench. Her face was covered with her mask, and she had these thick rimmed glasses. She looked at me as I was speaking, pensively. And then she just interjected and said, "We heard all of that before. People come around here all the time, and they say these good things, and they say they're going to make these changes. And you sound really good, and you're probably going to win. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to be a thorn in your side, and I'm going to hold you accountable when you do." And I stopped. I looked at her, and I was like, "What's your name?" She goes, "My name is Miss Barrett." I said, "Miss Barrett, I want you to more than just hold me accountable. I want you to do more than just be a thorn in my side. I want to be your partner. I want to be working with you. I want you to guide me. I want you to give me advice. And I need you with me every day. I need you today, tomorrow, election day, and every day after that as your city councilor. And there are many ways that we can work with each other." I spoke to her about the sidewalks that she walked on, that she had trouble at times getting across with her walker. How do we make those sidewalks better for you and for your neighbors? And half the time it's just, we got to catalog this information. We got to show people, hey, we need this fixed. We need to bring attention to it. When there's a lot of different issues happening like throughout the city, it's sometimes we just got to help focus our colleagues, the people that are working in the city, on what issues that are important to us, and we got to bring attention to it. And so this is a way we can become active civically in a way that can be transformative within our community.
So you raise a point. So you're running for District 7. First of all, for those who may not know, what area is District 7 comprised of?
So District 7 is all of Roxbury, parts of South End, parts of Fenway, and parts of Dorchester.
Okay. With that said, District 7, so we know there are 4 at-large city councilors that cover the entire city. This is a really strong mayoral city, all right? So the mayor, one of the places that I understand that the city council actually really has power is in passing the budget.
Yes, sir.
Right? Because quite candidly, other than that, pretty much he can really veto really pretty much everything. Right. So, as you talk about influence and impact. So as a district city councilor, you have influence very specifically over District 7. Right. So that's laser, right? Hyper focused, right? So for this woman who you're talking about who's in the district, who's going to hold you accountable for the needs that are specifically in District 7, because the things that you may not have as much influence outside of District 7 as a District 7 city councilor to be able to address some of the overarching kinds of stuff that's, going to affect overall city of Boston. I just say that to say realistically, as people sometimes talk about politics and to that woman's point, we've heard it all before, and people become cynical because the truth of the matter is not really understanding the power and how the system is set up. So when you have 4 at-large city councilors, all of those are people who can advocate for you in addition to your district city councilor. Yeah. Not to mention the fact that you also, quite candidly, I've had city councilors who were not my city councilors who were strong advocates for issues that affected a community that I'm serving, though that was not their, that wasn't limited. They just were passionate about that, including, quite candidly, city councilor Charles Yancey. And one of the ways that he did that was via the budget, because understanding, You know, you can have the conversation about line items being level funded, increased, or decreased, but they have to exist.
Yeah.
And the one place that, in one portion, he was not going to pass the budget until they actually created a line item to be able to address some of the stuff that we were doing, you know, resolutions and programming, and all that meant nothing without money, teeth to actually implement any kind of a plan. So, and with that said, one of the things that we learned in retrospect was the later point that those resources, because the resources were always intended for coalition initiatives, but because that wasn't articulated in the process of how these resources should be allocated in terms of funding, right? It wasn't written that way. And so we learned. It was a learning process. But I said it to say that so people really understand, you know, the altruism sometimes that people come into politics thinking that, oh, well, I can do this, I can do that. And you really just don't have that kind of preview because you're limited as a city council and the way the structures are set up.
Absolutely. And, you know, so you're making a lot of points here that I have a few follow-ups.
Please, yes.
So the first, I believe in participatory budget. We need our people involved, we need our communities involved in this process. And I'd be a strong advocate for supporting and funding as well too, and ensuring that people have the opportunity to understand the budget process and are making the decisions alongside of their colleagues and representatives in city council.
Expound upon that a little bit, because this participatory budget is a new concept.
Yep.
And so I don't know. I like the concept because it's saying we can be participatory, right? Yep. Where before it's just pass or not.
Yep.
So expound upon that a little bit just so people understand.
I think it's an opportunity to educate people about where funding is actually going and how it's going to be spent. And they should be a part of the process of questioning this process and why is this going here and why are we making decisions, so they could speak to their representatives to ensure that their views and the issues and the programs they hope to support are being supported in this moment. You know, so we need to bring people along for the journey, and I think that's my perspective on governance as a whole. Stakeholder engagement is core and it should be central in how we govern. We should take our lead from the people that have elected us. So, but and I understand people have very busy lives and it's challenging to stay on top of everything. But as much as we can make it easier for them to be a part of the process, I'm a big proponent of and supportive of. And I know it may take the process a little longer to get to a conclusion or a consensus, but I think on the back end, you have a more fruitful result. You know, you have a well thought out result and something that people have ownership and stake in. So I feel strongly that we should put more resources into that to ensure people are a part of this process.
Let me go there real quick, because if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was District 7, if I'm not mistaken, that had a district office. And that was
Tanya, city councilor.
Turner,
Turner,
who implemented that, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the few places. I mean, to have people participate, you have to have the accessibility. Everybody's not going downtown. So, is that something that your office would support? Is a district office?
Absolutely. You know, I think you got to be accessible to the people where they're at. Meet them where they're at. And if I'm talking about having a process where I'm getting people civically engaged, I got to be accessible on the ground with them. So I'm more than just supportive of it. That's part of my plan.
And with the district office, he also used to have meetings, because I used to go to those meetings. I want to say Saturdays, whatever, that were opportunities consistently for people to be from the community engaged in planning. Yeah.
And I think it's important that anybody be able to, right? You open up your doors for everybody to be able to share in this democratic process or this democratic experiment that we have here in our country. I think it's important to, and this is how we encourage people to be more involved. And this is how we build agents of change over time. People start to understand how it operates, and I want them to teach other people. And I want them to show that they can have impact. And this is incredibly important to me, and it's one of the key focuses for me, like as a hopefully one day city councilor for District 7. I also want to say, you know, as a city councilor, a lot of your focus is on constituency services. This is where you're going to have the greatest impact, so that can't be lost. You know, you have to ensure you're delivering for your community in that way. But I also do believe that these can be laboratories where we create policies and ideas that can be impactful. We can start off with folks from a community coming up with policy around, it could be something like housing in their community and how housing should be developed. And hopefully that becomes the model that we can put forth in city council, create a home rule petition, and that goes to the legislature, and it could be state law from there. Or at least we can try to adopt ordinances as well that support it here in our in the city council. In city council, you know, the other point that I want to try to get at is issues don't know boundaries, right? So what happens in one district can affect another.
Sure.
Right. So it's important that we work collaboratively, work alongside our colleagues, even if it's not an issue that's directly in the district. And in this case, for District 7, Mass and Cass is like the nucleus or the center of it is not necessarily in District 7.
Correct.
But it has great impact on District 7. And so we got to be able to work alongside our colleagues. So right now, Fitzgerald and Flynn are the city councilors in the other in the other districts that I'd like to work with to try to come up with solutions for this crisis, because it is a crisis, and being able to treat these people like humans, right? And trying to find solutions for them, a phased approach that can help them recover and change their lives, because they're battling both addiction and mental health issues in some cases. So we need to dedicate the resources, the attention, and work collaboratively, not only just on a municipal level, but the state level and the federal level. We may have some challenges on the federal level, but at least we can work with our state partners as well too. So I really look at it as the work that we do here on a very micro level in the district can become policy that can be impactful on a federal level one day. And I'd like to take on or ask my neighbors to help come together and help decide these policies together. And we can pressure test it, and we can do studies on it as well too, and we can bring it up to the city council and other colleagues as well too. I don't think that we should feel like we can't have an impact in that way, because I believe we absolutely can, and it's been the case in the past, right? How many home rule petitions have come out of city council and gone on to be law on the state level, right? So I think we could have a great impact, and we have a brain trust in District 7. There's a lot of brilliant people, and people that feel jaded or don't feel like they have a voice. And I think they should be able to step forward in this moment to hopefully craft policy and ideas that can be impactful of not just the district, but beyond as well too. But definitely the district first.
So Boston is recognized as the safest big city. I think that's the language that they're saying, the safest big city in the country. Have you heard that?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that stat line and or that suggested before, but let's be clear, one homicide is one too many.
Absolutely.
So let's keep on working on making it safer. You know, because I have neighbors that will tell you that it doesn't feel safe for them. And even on my street, there's conflicts from time to time that I hear about, or I see, or I witness. You know, so it's not safe enough.
And I appreciate that with it not being safe enough. So there are entities like the Massachusetts Association of Minority Law Enforcement Officers. They have a broadcast right here on Boston Praise every Saturday, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. And these are retired and active duty male, female, black, and brown police officers who are experiencing racism and sexism and all kinds of pushback when they confront things that are happening within the police department that is not right, or they see desperate treatment happening in their own communities, and they call those kinds of things and desperate treatment on how they hair test, and they've had to sue and so forth and so on. So I'm wondering, what would be your relationship, because I feel like as the mayor touts Boston being the safest big city, the credit is given to the commissioner. the credit is given to the administration as opposed to people who are coming out of incarceration, right? Who are having an impact, opposed to nonprofit organizations and faith-based, a lot of folks under the radar that are really contributing to that, right? So, you know, and entities that have, so to really make it, you know, to build on whatever level of safety that it really is, and having the honest conversations that's not just, you know, perpetuating an image or an illusion, but how do we really build on what we have that's factual, that would be, as you said, more intentionally bringing in people whom have systematically been pushed out and we're wasting resources.
To borrow from Hillary Clinton's book, It Takes a Village, there are many stakeholders that come together that ensure or help to work daily that our community and our city is safe. But there are forces that also work against that as well too. So the work is constant. You can never give up and rest on your laurels. And you have to be able to engage and work with as many partners in this moment to ensure that we find greater success. We can't just be comfortable about where we're at. Mm-hmm. So the objective is to get to zero homicide, is to reduce recidivism, is to ensure that our incarcerated people, or family members and friends, are coming back into this community and being productive members of our society. We just got to, it's restless work, and it's work that has to be very continuous, and we have to continue forward and, you know, really think creatively and working with different partners and providers in this moment as well too.
Let me go one more piece. So as you talk about being creative, and I know Dr. Ojutuku, who is the commissioner of the Boston Public Health Commission, as a woman who's really trying to address a lot of the health disparities. Yep. And some of those things, you know, we've found nutrition deserts, right? That are things that are precursors to mental illness and trauma and diabetes and, you know, and incarceration and this becomes a vicious cycle, right? So and there are entities that they had, like the Daily Table and other places, even some
drove
of the,
right by it, and you know that
they're not here anymore, right? So this was an opportunity for people in the inner city to be able to have nutritious options that they no longer have. So I don't know if it's urban gardening. Like, I don't know what the solution is, but you know, a lot of stuff's talking about green, but we have to think outside the box. How are we going to offer? And I would submit people in the inner city. I have a nephew who loves farming, right? And, you know, those are some real viable options for people in the inner city, urban gardens that will be able to afford nutritious vegetables and so forth that will be relatively inexpensive, and how those things will be able to bring down some of the other health disparities that we experience in poor and black and brown communities.
Yeah, this brings me to a conversation that I had today with a stakeholder when I was visiting Nubian Market and Nubian Square. You know, so it's a grocery store, and it's also a healthy food option cafe for people in the community. And I think we need to see more innovative spaces like that within the community. So I believe any development that goes up in our main streets, we should have some retail space for businesses like that and entrepreneurs. And it is a food desert, right? There are many healthy food options for people in our community, and that contributes to the quality of life and our health and life expectancy. So we've identified that. So we need to divert solutions to ensure that we can, you know, help resolve that problem. And I see opportunity within Roxbury specifically to do that, you know, whereas the South End, we have a lot of great thriving businesses there. And I want to be able to try to see if we can have that same model in Roxbury as well too.
Mm-hmm. So with like 10 minutes, I'm going to actually give you the camera and the mic, and for you to be able to speak to our listening and our viewing audience and articulate to them why they should cast their precious franchise with you for District 7.
Yeah, 10 minutes is a while. I don't think I really need all that time.
Okay, all right.
But I just want to say thank you so much. I really appreciate for this opportunity to engage people from my community. And I appreciate the moment to talk about some of these issues because they're very important. And I've stated, you know, many times, decisions are made by those who show up. In this moment, we have to show up together for our community to help create the improvements in quality of life that we deserve and need. And we need to be able to work with each other in this moment. I've spoken about stakeholder engagement and making sure that we bring all like parties to the table so we can make decisions. I think for me, my approach is more important at times than some of the issues we're discussing, because it's really centered on getting people active and civically engaged and involved in the process, giving the voiceless voice, and giving people the opportunity to create the community or build the community that they hope to see for themselves, creating agents of change and really guiding and facilitating that process. I'm taking lessons from great leaders of our past like Chuck Turner and Mel King, who are also my fraternity brothers. I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. So I just got to shout out to my bros real quick. But, you know, and a lot of what we focused on, or a lot of what they focused on, is this idea that you want to give people the tools and the knowledge, you know, because one individual can't change it all. So in this moment, I'm asking you to join me to help like transform this community and help to transform our culture, how we operate, how we see things, how we handle some of the problems and issues we face. And I think I'm in the best place in my life to be able to serve at that capacity, because the experiences I've had, it's also almost as if God prepares you for these moments and brings people together at the right time. And right now is a desperate moment in our community where we need to work with each other. We can't let divisive politics separate us. In this moment, we need to engage each other. We can have our discussions, we can have our disagreements, but we need to find areas where we find synergy and that we can work with each other, and then we can move the needle and find solutions. Because there are people out there that are in desperate need. And I want to be a part of that movement. I want to help to bring people together.
Thank you. So for one who might be interested in joining your campaign, supporting your campaign, how would they learn more about your campaign and how to be supportive? Absolutely.
So my website is votemaverick.com. So that's Vote Maverick, MAVRICK.com. Or you can follow me on Instagram or Facebook at votemaverick.com. And then I'll just probably see you out in the community. I'm going to probably knock on your door. And when you do see me and you're interested, please let me know that. Because the way that I'm campaigning is going to be the precursor of how I'll govern and support our community. And that means that we got to build this movement starting now.
Thank you again for being with us.
Yes, sir.
And thank you, Pastor. You're welcome. Thank you, our listening and our viewing audience, for being with us for another segment of Healing Our Land's broadcast here on the Boston Praise Radio Open TV Network. If God said the same, I'll see you next Wednesday and Friday, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Again, thank you and good night.
God bless.